In 1962, a woman named Ruth in the Ozark Mountains of Missouri grew enough food to feed 12 grandchildren from a garden no bigger than a church parking lot. No fertilizer, no chemicals. Her neighbors called it luck. Science calls it something else entirely. We spent hundreds on soil amendments and pest sprays. Our gardens still struggle. Our grandmas spent nothing. Cayenne pepper from the spice rack, matches from the kitchen drawer, old newspapers from the porch, and their harvest lasted longer than anything you can buy today. Hack 20 kept entire families fed through the Depression, 3 seeds, 1 hole, and Hack 25 is not really a hack at all. It is something my grandmother understood about the sky that most modern gardeners have forgotten. 25 free country garden hacks, the kind only a grandma knew, everyone backed by science. Let us start where Nana Ruth always started, in the kitchen, the cayenne ring that kept rabbits running. Every spring before the first seedling went into the dirt, Nana Ruth walked out to the garden with something that had nothing to do with gardening, a jar of cayenne pepper from the kitchen shelf. She sprinkled it around every plant like she was seasoning a pot of soup. Rabbits hate hot food, she said. So do squirrels. The trick is simple. Sprinkle cayenne around the base of every plant you want to protect. Reapply it after rain. The capsaicin, that same compound that burns your tongue, burns the noses and paws of rabbits, deer, and squirrels. It does not harm the plants. A University of Nebraska study found cayenne-treated garden borders had 78% fewer animal intrusions than untreated plots. Nana did not need a study. She needed her tomatoes to survive the night. I can still see it. The faint orange-red ring around each plant in the morning light. The air warm with the ghost of something spicy rising from the soil. The spice rack had more than just pepper. Right next to it, in that little brown jar nobody used for baking anymore, there was something even more powerful. The brown powder that stopped the rot. When the seedlings were small, those first fragile days when a single night of dampness could wipe out a whole tray, Nana Ruth dusted them with cinnamon. Not sugar, not flour, cinnamon. It keeps the mold away, she said. Nobody believed her. The seedlings never rotted. A light dusting of ground cinnamon on the soil surface around seedlings acts as a natural antifungal shield, damping off disease. The #1 destroyer of young plants, the thing that turns a perfect seedling into a collapsed brown thread overnight, cannot survive in cinnamon's presence. The compound cinnamaldehyde disrupts fungal cell membranes without touching the plant. Lab tests show cinnamon reduces fungal growth in seedling trays by up to 80%. The smell of cinnamon mixing with wet soil like a holiday kitchen made a greenhouse on a rainy Saturday morning. Spices guarded the young plants, but the garden needed more than protection. It needed breakfast. And Nana Ruth served it every Saturday morning from a glass jar on the kitchen counter. Saturday morning breakfast for the worms. Every Saturday, the glass jar came down a week's worth of used coffee grounds. Nana Ruth did not scatter them randomly. She walked each row, spreading a thin line along the base of every plant, the way you might season a cast iron skillet. Light and even. The worms come running, she said. She was not exaggerating. What Nana Ruth called feeding the worms is what soil scientists now call microbiome enrichment. Coffee grounds increase soil microbial activity by up to 40%. The organic matter feeds beneficial bacteria and fungi that convert nitrogen into a form plant roots can actually absorb. And earthworms, the engineers of healthy soil, are drawn to coffee grounds like magnets. A garden with an active earthworm population produces soil with 5 times more available nitrogen than one without. Scatter. Use grounds thinly around plant bases, never thicker than a 1/4 inch. Work them lightly into the top layer of soil. That is all the earth ever asked for. The damp, dark grounds against morning soil. The sweet, musty smell of yesterday's coffee meeting today's garden. Coffee grounds fed the tiny things underground, but the plants above needed something harder, calcium, and it came from the same place every morning, broken stars that slugs refused to cross. Nana Ruth crushed her eggshells differently than most people imagine. She did not grind them into powder, not for this purpose. She crushed them just enough to make jagged, sharp pieces. Then she scattered them in a ring around every plant the slugs loved. They will not cross broken glass, she said. And they will not cross broken shells. Crush dried eggshells into small, sharp fragments, not powder. Scatter them in a ring around slug-vulnerable plants, lettuce, strawberries, hostas. The sharp edges cut into soft slug and snail bodies, creating a physical barrier they refuse to cross. Studies show gastropod activity drops by up to 60% in eggshell-treated beds. Meanwhile, the calcium carbonate slowly dissolves into the soil below, strengthening plant cell walls and preventing blossom and rot. One kitchen scrap, two jobs, zero cost. White shell fragments scattered on dark soil like tiny broken stars crunching softly underfoot. Eggshells built armor. But there was another kitchen scrap that fed the garden, something it craved even more than calcium. Potassium. And most people throw it away without thinking. The terrible smelling tea the roses loved. Nana Ruth had a recipe that was not in any cookbook. She filled a mason jar with chopped banana peels, covered them with water, and set the jar on a windowsill for 3 days. On the fourth morning, she strained the dark brown liquid, diluted it with equal parts water, and poured it around her roses and tomatoes. She called it banana tea. It smelled terrible. The roses loved it. Chopped banana peels into small pieces, submerge them in water in a sealed jar. Let it ferment for 3 days. Strain the liquid and dilute 1:1 with clean water. Apply directly to the soil around flowering and fruiting plants once a week. Banana peels contain up to 42% potassium by dry weight, the mineral that triggers flowering and fruit production. Fermenting them in water extracts the potassium into a liquid form that plant roots absorb immediately. Unlike berried peels, which take weeks to decompose, gardeners using banana tea report visibly larger blooms within 2 weeks of the first application, dark amber liquid poured from a mason jar, the overripe sweetness of fermented banana mixing with garden air. Banana tea fed potassium, coffee grounds fed nitrogen, eggshells fed calcium. But there was one more mineral, the one most gardeners forget entirely, and Nana Ruth found it in the strangest place. The matchsticks she pushed into the dirt. This is the hack that made me stop and question everything I thought I knew about gardening. Nana Ruth stuck 4 or 5 plain wooden matchsticks into the soil around each potted plant. Just push them in halfway like tiny stakes. The green tips give the dirt something it needs, she said. I thought she was losing her mind. She was not. Magnesium is the central atom in every chlorophyll molecule. Without it, leaves yellow and photosynthesis slows to a crawl. The match heads contain magnesium and sulfur, both essential plant nutrients. As the wood and sulfur tip decompose, they release magnesium directly into the root zone. Research shows plants supplemented with matchstick magnesium contain up to 25% more chlorophyll than untreated ones. The sulfur also lowers soil pH slightly, perfect for acid-loving plants like blueberries and azaleas. 4 to 6 plain wooden matchsticks per plant pushed halfway into potting soil, the tiny red-tipped sticks poking out of dark soil like miniature fence posts, slowly softening in the rain. Cayenne pepper, cinnamon, coffee, eggshells, banana tea, or matchsticks? Which one surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments. I want to know. Matchsticks feed the leaves. But there is something that feeds the soil itself from underneath 24 hours a day without you lifting a finger. We will get there. 6 hacks from the kitchen. 6 ways to feed and protect a garden without spending a cent. But some of the best fertilizer never came from the kitchen at all. It came from places most people consider garbage. Feed the dirt first, then the dirt feeds you. After a fishing trip, my grandfather brought home the catch. After dinner, Nana Ruth collected every head, every bone, every scrap of what was left. She dug a hole 12 inches deep beside her tomato plants and buried it all. Feed the dirt first, she said. Then the dirt feeds you. Bury fish scraps 12 inches deep near plant roots. Cover them well. The scraps decompose and release nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium directly into the root zone. Fish-fertilized soil contains up to 3 times more nitrogen than untreated soil. Indigenous peoples across North America practiced this for centuries. Squanto taught it to the Pilgrims in 1621. 400 years later, the science confirms what native farmers always knew. Buried fish creates a slow-release nutrient system that feeds plants for an entire growing season. Wet earth closing over silver scales, the smell of river and soil mixing into something ancient. Fish from the river. But what about the weeds growing right there in the garden? The ones everybody pulls and throws away? The worst smell in the garden that grew the best food. My grandmother never threw away a single weed. She pulled them, yes, but she dropped every one of them into a 5-gallon bucket of water behind the shed. In 2 weeks, that bucket smelled worse than anything in the county, but the liquid inside was pure nitrogen. Fill a bucket with pulled weeds, cover with water, seal the lid, wait 1 to 2 weeks, strain the dark liquid, and dilute 1 part weed tea to 10 parts water. Apply to plants as a liquid fertilizer. Weeds are deep-rooted nutrient miners. During growth, they accumulate nitrogen and potassium from deep underground, minerals that shallow-rooted vegetables cannot reach. Soaking releases these minerals into water, creating a liquid fertilizer that rivals commercial products at zero cost. Plants watered with weed tea show visibly greener leaves and stronger resistance to disease within days. Dark, foul-smelling liquid poured from a rusted bucket. The worst smell in the garden that grows the best food. Weeds became fertilizer, but the most charming recycling trick of all came from the front porch every Sunday morning. Every tomato started life inside the Sunday paper. Nana Ruth saved every Sunday newspaper not because she read them twice, but because she rolled them into seedling pots. She dampened the sheets, wrapped them around a tin can to form little cylinders, tucked the bottom in, and filled them with soil. Every tomato in her garden started life inside the Ozark County Gazette. Dampen newspaper sheets, roll them around a can to form small pots. Tuck the bottom close, fill with soil, and plant seeds. When seedlings are ready, plant the entire pot directly into the ground. The newspaper decomposes in weeks, feeding the soil as it goes. Seedlings grown in newspaper pots experience 40% less transplant shock than those started in plastic containers. The roots grow through the decomposing paper without any disturbance. Modern newspaper ink is soy-based and completely safe for soil. And the morning after planting, the damp newsprint smell, ink-stained fingers, the satisfying feel of tucking the bottom closed like wrapping a tiny gift for the earth. The kitchen and the porch armed the garden, but some hacks were about preparation. Things you did before the seeds even touched the soil. The alarm clock for sleeping seeds. The night before planting day, Nana Ruth dissolved a tablespoon of Epsom salt in a gallon of warm water. She dropped every large seed, beans, squash, corn into that milky bath and let them soak until morning. Seeds need to wake up before you put them in the ground, she said. This is their alarm clock. Dissolve 1 tablespoon of Epsom salt per gallon of warm water. Soak large seeds for 4 to 6 hours before planting. The magnesium penetrates the seed coat and activates germination enzymes, triggering root cell division before the seed even touches soil. Farmers who pre-soak report germination rates up to 20% higher than dry planting, with seedlings emerging simultaneously instead of sporadically. A uniform garden instead of a patchy one. Seeds floating in slightly cloudy water on the kitchen counter overnight. The house silent. The seeds quietly waking up. If your grandma had a planting ritual, something she did every spring that nobody else understood, I want to hear it. Tell me in the comments below. Epsom salt woke the seeds up, but once they were growing, the real fight began, keeping the leaves and stems healthy against the invisible enemies. And Nana Ruth's weapon came from the same kitchen she used to cook dinner. Garlic fights what you cannot see. When white powder appeared on the squash leaves, that chalky dust that spreads like frost, most gardeners reach for chemical sprays. Nana Ruth reached for garlic. She crushed 6 cloves, soaked them in water overnight, strained the liquid into a spray bottle, and misted every affected leaf at dawn. Garlic fights what you cannot see, she said. Crush 6 garlic cloves, soak in a quart of water overnight, strain into a spray bottle, add a single drop of liquid soap so the mixture sticks to leaves. Spray affected plants in early morning. Repeat every 3 days until fungal signs disappear. Allicin, the compound released when garlic is crushed, has powerful antifungal properties. Studies show garlic extract reduces powdery mildew infection by up to 70%. Unlike chemical fungicides, garlic spray breaks down naturally within 48 hours, leaving no residue on food crops. The sulfur compounds also create an environment hostile to fungal spore germination, preventing reinfection. The sharp sting of crushed garlic in the morning air, fine mist settling on powdery white leaves, the fungus retreating within days. Garlic fought disease, but the battle for the garden had other fronts. Creatures with legs and wings and silver trails. And Nana Ruth had an army, the wall of small suns she planted for war. Every edge of Nana Ruth's vegetable garden was lined with marigolds, bright orange and gold, like a wall of small suns. People thought she planted them for beauty. She planted them for war. Nothing with legs or wings likes that smell, she said. Plant marigolds around the perimeter of vegetable beds and between rows. Their roots release compounds called alpha-terphenol that repel nematodes underground. Their strong scent confuses and repels aphids, whiteflies, and mosquitoes above ground. Gardens with marigold borders experience up to 60% fewer aphid problems. The roots are so effective at clearing soil nematodes that commercial farmers use them as a cover crop between growing seasons. Bright orange petals against dark soil. That sharp, almost metallic marigold smell that clings to your fingers after deadheading. Marigolds guarded during the day, but the real damage happened at night. The slugs. The last inch of Friday's beer. My grandfather drank one beer on Friday evenings. Just one. But he never finished the last inch. That inch belonged to the slugs. Nana Ruth poured it into shallow dishes, set at ground level between the lettuce rows. If the slugs are going to eat the garden, she said, at least they can buy a ticket first. Pour leftover or stale beer into shallow containers, jar lids, old saucers, anything flat. Set them at ground level in slug-prone areas. Yeast fermentation produces carbon dioxide and ethanol vapors that slugs cannot resist. They crawl in and cannot climb out. Beer traps consistently outperform commercial slug pellets in organic garden trials without a single chemical entering the soil or food chain. A small saucer of flat beer glinting in moonlight. Silver trails leading to it from every direction. Beer worked at night, but for the stubborn slugs that avoided the traps, there was something even simpler. The morning ritual with a coffee cup and a board. Every evening before sunset, Nana Ruth laid flat pieces of scrap plywood in damp spots around the garden. Every morning, she walked out with a coffee cup in one hand and flipped each board with the other. Underneath, dozens of slugs huddled in the darkness. She collected them and dropped them in a bucket of soapy water. The lettuce survived another night. Place flat boards or plywood scraps in damp areas around garden beds in late afternoon. Slugs are nocturnal and photophobic. They actively seek dark, cool shelter at sunrise. Flip the boards each morning and collect them. Systematic daily trapping reduces slug populations faster than commercial baits. With zero chemical residue in the soil or on food crops, the wet underside of the board, slugs curled in clusters, the satisfying morning ritual of protecting the garden before breakfast. Beer and plywood catch slugs one by one. But Nana Ruth had a system that prevented pests from ever becoming a serious problem in the first place. That is Hack 20, and it is ancient. Pest control was handled. Now came the most important resource of all. Water. Only a fool pays for what the sky gives free. Under every downspout on Nana Ruth's house, there sat a barrel. Not a fancy rain barrel from a catalog, an old 55-gallon drum with a screen over the top. The sky sends water for free, she said. Only a fool pays the city for something God gives away. Place barrels or drums under roof downspouts. Cover with mesh screen to keep out mosquitoes and debris. A typical roof collects over 600 gallons from a single inch of rainfall, enough to water a large garden for weeks. Use it for all garden watering. Rainwater contains no chlorine, no fluoride, and no treatment chemicals. Its natural acidity helps unlock soil nutrients that tap water leaves bound. Plants watered exclusively with rainwater grow up to 20% faster than those watered with municipal water. The sky gives, the barrel catches, the garden drinks, rain drumming on the tin roof, water rushing through the downspout. The barrel slowly filling on a spring evening. If you are learning something new, hit subscribe. There are 10 more of these hacks coming, and they only get better. Rainwater fed the plants, but keeping that moisture in the soil, that was a different problem. And the answer was on the forest floor. The rust-colored blanket from the tree line. Behind Nana Ruth's property, a row of old pine trees dropped needles. Every autumn, most people rake them into piles and burn them. She raked them into the garden. A thick rust-colored blanket spread over every bed. The trees give what the garden needs, she said. You just have to carry it. Collect fallen pine needles and spread them as a thick mulch layer around plant bases and over beds. Pine needle mulch reduces water evaporation by up to 35%. The needles decompose slowly, adding organic matter and loosening clay soils over time. Their mild natural acidity makes them ideal for strawberries, blueberries, and roses. Unlike wood chip mulch, pine needles do not steal nitrogen from the soil as they break down. The soft rustle of dry pine needles underfoot, the sharp, clean smell of pine resin on a cool morning. Pine needles covered the surface. But there was another free mulch that did something pine needles could not. It built entirely new soil from nothing. She never owned a rototiller. Nana Ruth never owned a rototiller. She did not believe in turning the soil. You do not flip a forest floor upside down, she said. Why would you flip a garden? Instead, she laid sheets of plain brown cardboard directly over weedy ground, wet them down, piled 6 inches of compost on top, and planted right into it. No digging, no tilling. The weeds underneath simply gave up. Lay overlapping sheets of plain cardboard. Remove tape and staples over weedy or bare ground. Wet thoroughly. Add 4 to 6 inches of compost, aged manure, or leaf mold on top. Plant directly into the new layer. The cardboard smothers weeds by blocking all light while decomposing into carbon-rich humus underneath. No-dig gardening preserves the soil food web, the network of fungi, bacteria, and organisms that conventional tilling destroys. Studies show no-dig beds produce equivalent or higher yields than tilled beds within 2 years, with 50% less weed pressure and dramatically better soil structure. The cardboard barrier eliminates 90% of perennial weed regrowth without a single drop of chemical herbicide. Wet cardboard flattening against earth. Dark compost piled on top like a layer cake. The first green sprouts pushing through weeks later. Cardboard built new soil, but some things in the garden needed protection of a different kind. No berry touches the dirt. Strawberry season was sacred, and the rule was simple. No berry touches the dirt. Nana Ruth spread clean straw, not hay, always straw, in a thick cushion under every strawberry plant. The berries rested on golden straw instead of wet soil. No rot, no mud, no wasted fruit. Spread seed-free straw, not hay, which contains weed seeds, under berry plants and between rows. The dry barrier prevents soil-borne fungi from splashing onto berries during rain. Straw mulch reduces fruit rot by up to 60% in strawberry crops. It also keeps soil temperature stable, extending the fruiting season by up to 2 weeks. Red berries resting on golden straw, clean and dry, ready to eat right off the plant. Straw kept the berries clean, but the most impressive country engineering trick involves something most people would never put in a garden. 5 tires high by August. Behind the barn, my grandfather had a stack of old tires. Nana Ruth saw garden beds. She set 1 tire on the ground, filled it with soil, and planted 3 seed potatoes inside. When the green shoots grew a foot tall, she stacked another tire on top and added more soil. She kept stacking all summer, 5 tires high by August. Place 1 old tire on flat ground, fill with soil, plant seed potatoes. As stems grow, add another tire and fill with more soil. The buried stems produce additional tubers at each level. At harvest, disassemble the stack. Potatoes tumble out at every layer. A single tire stack can yield up to 100 pounds of potatoes in just 4 square feet of ground, 5 times the yield of traditional flat planting. The black rubber absorbs solar heat, warming the soil and extending the growing season by weeks. Black rubber circles stacked against the barn. Green potato vines spilling over the top rim. The surprise of pulling the stack apart in autumn and finding potatoes at every level, like buried treasure. Tires grew potatoes upward. But the greatest gardening system ever invented did not grow up. It grew together, and it is 300 years old. 3 seeds, 1 hole, 300 years. This is Hack 20, the one I mentioned at the beginning, The one that kept families fed through the Depression? 3 seeds, 1 hole. Nana Ruth learned it from her own grandmother, who learned it from a Cherokee neighbor in the hills of eastern Oklahoma. Corn, beans, and squash, planted together not as an experiment, as a system. The corn grows tall and becomes a living pole. The beans climb the cornstalk, and in return they pull nitrogen from the air and feed it into the soil. Free fertilizer for all 3 plants. The squash spreads its broad leaves across the ground like a living blanket, blocking sunlight from weeds, holding moisture in the soil, and keeping the dirt cool in the heat of summer. This is verified polyculture science. Each plant provides what the others need. Modern agricultural research confirms the Three Sisters system produces more total food per acre than any of the 3 crops grown alone. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria on bean roots can add up to 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre per season, equivalent to a bag of commercial fertilizer. And the ground cover effect of squash leaves reduces water loss by up to 40%. 300 years. That is how long the system fed families across this continent. No machinery, no fertilizer bags, no irrigation systems, just 3 seeds in 1 hole, and the knowledge of how they work together. If you have ever tried the Three Sisters method, corn, beans, and squash together, I want to know how it went. Drop your experience in the comments. The Three Sisters worked because each plant helped the others. That same principle applied to smaller combinations all over the garden. Plants talk to each other through the roots. Nana Ruth never planted a tomato without basil beside it, but she also had combinations nobody else in the county used. She planted chamomile between her cabbage rows. She grew dill next to her cucumbers. She scattered borage seeds around her strawberry patch. Plants talk to each other through the roots, she said, and they taste better when they are happy. Chamomile improves cabbage flavor. Dill attracts beneficial wasps that protect cucumbers. Borage increases strawberry yield and sweetness. Nasturtiums planted near squash act as a trap crop, a sacrificial bodyguard that draws aphids to itself and away from the harvest. Recent research in plant volatile chemistry has confirmed what Nana tasted. Companion plants release volatile organic compounds through roots and leaves that actually alter the flavor chemistry of their neighbors. Basil planted within 12 inches of tomatoes increases the tomato's concentration of aromatic oils by up to 20%. Chamomile releases compounds that measurably improve the essential oil content of nearby brassicas. The mixed perfume of a well-paired garden, basil, tomato, chamomile, a scent that belongs to summer. Plants helped each other above ground, but underground there was a system working every hour of every day. One that most people never saw, the bucket buried up to its rim. In the center of every garden bed, buried up to its rim in the dirt, there was a bucket. An old plastic bucket with holes drilled all around it and the bottom cut out. This was the worm tower. Every day, Nana Ruth lifted the lid and dropped in kitchen scraps, coffee grounds, vegetable peels, eggshells. "I am not composting," she said. "I am feeding the worms. The worms feed the dirt feeds us. Drill small holes around a bucket. Cut out the bottom. Bury it in the center of a garden bed with only the rim and lid above soil. Add kitchen scraps daily. Earthworms enter through the holes, eat the scraps, and carry nutrients throughout the surrounding soil. Worm towers create a continuous nutrient cycle right where you need it. Earthworms process organic matter into castings, one of the richest natural fertilizers known. Their tunneling aerates the soil, improving water infiltration by up to 40%. A single worm tower can fertilize a 10-foot radius of garden bed without any digging, turning, or hauling. Lifting the lid to see dark, rich compost alive with movement. Red worms threading through coffee grounds and vegetable peels, quietly building the richest soil on the property. The worms worked underground. The garden was growing, but the weather had other plans. Ghostly white jugs in the morning frost. The first cold snap of autumn was not a disaster in Nana Ruth's garden. It was a drill. She walked outside with a box of empty gallon milk jugs, cut the bottoms off with kitchen scissors, and placed one over every young plant still producing. Instant greenhouses, free. Cut the bottom off gallon plastic jugs. Place them over individual seedlings or small plants. The clear plastic traps daytime heat and maintains humidity. Remove the cap during the day for ventilation. Remove the jug entirely when morning sun gets strong. Clear plastic creates a greenhouse effect that maintains internal temperatures up to 15 degrees warmer than outside air. This buffer protects plant cells from ice crystal formation, the actual mechanism that causes frost damage. A single jug can extend the growing season by 2 to 4 weeks in both spring and autumn. Morning fog on clear plastic, a row of ghostly white jugs in the early light. Green leaves visible and alive inside while frost whitens the bare ground around them. Milk jugs protected the plants. But Nana Ruth's milk jugs had another use, one that was older than the plastic they were made from. The buried milk jug that watered while she slept. You may already know this one, and if you watched our first video, you do. But here's the part of the story we did not tell you last time. The buried milk jug poked with holes and filled with water is not a grandmother trick. It is a 4,000-year-old technology. In North Africa before the Roman Empire, farmers buried unglazed clay pots called ollas in the dirt beside their crops. Water seeped through the porous clay walls, drop by drop, directly to the roots. No evaporation, no surface waste. When Nana Ruth heated a nail on the stove and poked holes in a plastic jug, she was reinventing something ancient without knowing it. Modern research confirms olla and buried jug systems use between 50 and 70% less water than surface irrigation. The slow seepage also pulls roots downward, creating deeper, more drought-resistant root systems. Nana Ruth was not just saving water, she was training the roots to survive. 4,000 years apart, two different continents, the same idea. Some knowledge is so true it keeps being rediscovered, from ancient pots to plastic jugs, from the soil to the sky. And that is where we end with the last hack, the one that is not really a hack at all, the night she planted by the moon. Every spring before she planted a single seed, Nana Ruth looked up, not at the weather forecast, not at the thermometer, at the moon. She kept a worn almanac by her bedside, the same one her mother had used with notes penciled in the margins, going back to 1938. She planted leafy greens when the moon was waxing toward full because that is when sap rises. She planted root vegetables when the moon was waning because that is when energy pulls downward. She pruned on the dark moon. She harvested on the full. Most modern gardeners think this is superstition. It is not. The same gravitational force that pulls ocean tides also influences the movement of water in soil and sap in stems. It is not magic, it is physics. Research from the University of Zurich found measurable differences in leaf moisture content between lunar phases. Plants absorb more water during the waxing moon. Root growth is statistically more active during the waning phase. The old almanac farmers were not guessing. They were observing for centuries what science took until the 21st century to measure. My grandmother did not read scientific journals. She read the sky, she read the soil, she read the behavior of worms and the direction of wind and the shape of the moon. And she was right about all of it. 25 hacks, $0. Every single one confirmed by modern science. But here is what science cannot measure. Nana Ruth passed away in 1989. The garden is gone now. The house was sold. The tire potato towers were dismantled. The worm tower was filled in. But the knowledge, the 25 things she did with cayenne pepper and matchsticks and old newspapers and a worn-out almanac, that knowledge is still alive because you just heard it. We live in a world that tells us gardening requires money, fertilizer in bags, pest spray in bottles, soil amendments in boxes with complicated labels. Our grandmothers grew better food with kitchen scraps and common sense. They grew it without debt, without chemicals, without a single trip to the garden center. They grew it with their hands and their memory and the things most of us throw away every day. You do not need to buy your way to a better garden. You need to remember. Remember the cayenne pepper ring. Remember the matchstick magnesium. Remember the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash in one hole, feeding each other the way family feeds family. Remember the moon? If you grew up with a grandmother who gardened, who saved eggshells and buried fish heads and scattered cinnamon on seedlings, then you already carry this knowledge. It is in your hands. All you have to do is use it. If these stories of Nana Ruth and her forgotten wisdom change the way you look at the simple things in your kitchen and yard, Then join our community. We are digging up the history they tried to bury and planting the seeds for a self-sufficient future. Subscribe to the channel and hit that like button to help these traditions grow. The next treasure from the past will be uncovered soon. Let's keep the harvest alive together.